Well, I'll tell you one of the earliest memories I have of my wife because it kind of tells you what she's like. Eh? So she lived across the street from me in this little town that we grew up in called Fairview, Alberta. And I think I fell in love with her the moment that I saw her. And although I don't think the feeling was necessarily mutual. And so I was about like 7, I think, something like that. So I've known her for like 48 years. And here's one memory, because there are 2 memories I'll tell you. So one of them was when I was in grade 5, I got glasses. And I was pretty proud of these glasses. They were horn-rimmed glasses, and I was pretty proud of them. And I went out and she came out onto the street and she looked at my glasses. I said, "What do you think of those?" And she says, "I think you look really funny in those." And then she pointed at me and ran into her house. And it was like 20 years later that she finally told me that she had always wanted to have glasses and she was jealous about it. But, she decided she'd give me a good teasing and a good poke. And then we used to play croquet together. And one of the great delights she would take is, I don't know if you've ever played croquet, but, you're sometimes the one person's ball that they're hitting and another person's will come together, and then you can stand on your ball and you can nail it with the croquet mallet and like knock the other person's croquet ball halfway down the block. And she used to think that was pretty damn amusing when she did it to me. So, but yeah, I mean, I told my dad when I was in grade 5, I was sitting with her on this big armchair in our living room, and she was sitting beside me on the armchair, which I was pretty damn thrilled about. And she was being chased around by all the boys in the school at that point, even though that was in the elementary school, So she was very hot property, let's say, among the elementary school boys. And so I was pretty happy to have her sit by me. And so, anyways, she left, and I told my dad that I was going to marry her. And I remember that. And he told that story at our wedding, which was quite cute. And then I'll tell you one more story, which I really think is funny. This is so funny. So we were friends when we were kids, and then, girls mature faster than boys, and she's a year older than me because I skipped a grade in school. We were in the same grade in school. And so, when she hit about 13 or so, we kind of went our separate ways a little bit, although we still remained friends. And she had a paper route, and I took her paper route over when she hit 13 or so, and I like quadrupled the damn thing, I think, which I think is pretty funny. But I also delivered paper to her house, and one day she was there with another of her friends, and who was a kind of a cute chick too, and I liked her quite a bit. And they were sitting around talking about how they were feminists, roughly speaking, and they were talking when I walked in about the fact that neither of them were going to take their husband's last name when they got married. And Tammy, my wife, I think, said to her friend, "Well, that really means I'm going to have to find some wimp and marry him." And she turned around and looked at me and smiled evilly and said, "Hey, Jordan, do you want to get married?" And of course, I'd heard the whole conversation. And, she knew I liked her, obviously. And so that was a nice little comical dig. She has a very vicious sense of humor. And, I kind of laughed. And I thought, ha, 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 okay, yeah, okay, so fine. So then, I was like 28. And she had come to see me in Montreal. And we were talking about getting married. And she said, we were talking about what that would mean. And then we started talking about what the name would be. And I said, "Hey, I've got a story for you. Remember when you were 13 and I was delivering papers to your house?" And because I suggested that she take my last name, and she wasn't so sure about that. And I said, "Well, you remember that little story, that little episode that we had when you were 13 and I came over to your house and you told me that you weren't going to take your husband's name and that you're going to have to marry some wimp?" Said, "Okay, well, here I am, but, if we're going to get married, you're going to take my name." And that's the end of that argument.
When Jordan first asked me to marry him, he told me that if we didn't tell the truth, our relationship couldn't work. Mm-hmm. And so that was going to be, and that was when he was 25, something like that. So that was the first thing, that we were to tell the truth. And I hadn't really understood what that meant. I first took that to mean my truth in my relationships, what I'm, where my goals are, to make sure that was all truthful. So that was the first. So honesty was paramount. And he still talks about that as being very, very important. And so that is what got us started and really took us through. The other thing was that we didn't, if there was a problem, we didn't just let it go. It might have taken 3 days in the beginning to uncover what was happening, because we both were pretty strong-headed and probably didn't really want to admit that we had done anything to cause the trouble. So in the early days, but we didn't give up on it. He was very good at, even though he doesn't like conflict, he's a very soft-hearted, very compassionate person, as you can tell through his public image. He's a very compassionate person. But he would, and knowing that this would be uncomfortable, he would still insist that we talk about it until we understood it. And that was really good. We got through a lot of trouble by perseverance. And at the end of every mystery in the rosary, you pretty much pray for perseverance. It's all about trying again and getting up and trying again and getting up and trying again, no matter what. We enjoyed each other's company when we were kids. I thought he was smart back then. He was fascinating to be around. He had different ways of looking at things and dissecting problems. And, when we were really little, we played with a chemistry set. We liked that, and he really liked that, and I got to be a part of that. He taught me how to play chess when I was a little kid. That was really great. And I was 5 years younger than my siblings, so I didn't really grow up with my family. I grew up with my friends, and he was one of the friends that I grew up with. And I never got tired of being with him. And then when I left home when I was 18, and didn't really see him that much until I was in my 20s, or my mid-20s. And he called me and had moved within a couple of hours of where I lived when we were in our 20s. And I went to visit him, and he was getting his PhD. So it looked like he was getting his life together. He was taking responsibility for himself and moving forward. And I thought, if I don't marry him, I won't know what happens in his life as I do now. And so if I want to know what happens in his life, I'll have to marry him in order to be there. And, his dad was my school teacher. He was a good father. So I thought Jordan would be a good father. And he was interesting, and I wanted to be with somebody who was interesting. And so that's how I decided to marry him. He told his dad in grade 5 that he was going to marry me. So he'd decided a very long time ago. And I don't know when I learned that. I wasn't that young when I learned that. So it wasn't something that I knew about. But he was always there, even when I wasn't seeing him, when I was going home. I lived in Montreal, and I was going home to Northern Alberta at Christmas. And his family lived in this little town too. When I got home, it was so often that he would come to see me that I would know within a half an hour of getting home that he would knock on my door. So he was a constant friend. So he was not easily gotten rid of, I'd say. By the time I wanted to marry him, he was getting pretty popular with the women, so I thought I better marry him quick.